Today is chapter 5 and we're looking at activity-based costing, also known as ABC, which is what I'll be calling it most of the time. It's just a little bit easier to say. I'm starting in your book on the bottom of page 131. They start to discuss what ABC is, the strategic role of ABC. I've brought it up a few times in class, just at a very high level, and so today we'll get into it a little bit deeper. And just remember, we're coming off of the previous chapter, chapter 4, where we talked about variable costing. And so this is our other alternative to variable costing. We usually talk about variable costing first because it's a little bit easier to apply and to understand. And then once you kind of have a grasp on that, then the next step is to move on to activity-based costing and then to begin to understand that, understand the differences and why you would choose one over the other. And so the first thing we're really going to talk about then is the strategic role of activity-based costing. And this is a good slide to compare the two, ABC versus volume-based. So chapter 5, ABC, versus chapter 4, the volume-based approach. It says volume-based costing results may be distorted because indirect costs do not always occur in proportion to output volume. And what that means is that typically what happens in volume-based is, let's say you have two different products, and typically one product might be more of a base model, the other product might have a few more bells and whistles on it. But typically you manufacture a lot more of your base model because typically it's more attractive, a little bit more cheaper, more affordable for consumers. Well, because you make more of it, it gets more overhead in the volume-based costing method. It can be a little bit too simplistic. It's easy to use, but it can be too simplistic, which can mean that too much cost goes to a high volume product and not enough cost goes to a product that actually has, because the more bells and whistles that it has, should actually get more overhead than it does. And so that's what they call cross-subsidization of outputs, which is the middle bullet point here. Some products are overcosted and some are undercosted. And we have a good example in this chapter that we'll take a look at here towards the end of the chapter. ABC uses detailed information about the activities that make up indirect costs. Okay, so we're really going to focus on all the different activities that is required to manufacture something, and we'll take a look at what those are real soon. Remember that volume-based, we really just looked at a cost driver, and our cost drivers that we typically looked at were direct labor hours, or total direct labor cost, or machine hours. Those are kind of the big three. There's other ones too that we looked at, but those are really the big three, something involving direct labor or something involving machine cost, or machine hours I should say. So volume-based costing can still actually be okay for some firms. Some firms, volume-based is going to be just fine. Going into ABC really doesn't necessarily make sense. ABC requires a lot more work. There's a lot more needed to maintain an ABC system. Implementing it would not be cheap. You'd probably want to bring in some consultants and some help to do it. And then maintaining it would require a lot more than a simple volume-based system. So it says here some ideas or some times when volume-based would be the good way to go is when costs to be allocated are relatively small versus directly traceable cost. So we're not really allocating a lot of cost. So if the amount we're allocating compared to total cost isn't that much, then volume-based will be just fine. We're not going to get that much more bang for our buck by going to ABC. When activities supporting production are relatively homogeneous across different product service lines. So that's what they mean by that is if we really are going into more of a commodity. So if we're manufacturing, they say paper, agricultural products, professional service firms, volume-based is just fine because that direct labor number that a professional is billing somebody for, that's our cost driver. It just makes complete sense, and that's the biggest cost we're going to have of our firm. Think of a law firm, consultants, a CPA firm. You're really going to go with volume-based because direct labor is your driver, and the biggest cost that we're really going to have when it comes to providing services to our clients. So volume-based does have a place. It definitely does make sense to be using it. Some terminology regarding ABC, and that terminology is on page 133. And before I get too far, you really should read the example that they gave us on page 132. And they kind of give you, it's a little bit of a simplistic explanation, but I think it still makes sense. Where they talk about some friends and ordering some appetizers and how those costs should be shared. And I think you might get the point about why traditional versus ABC, why you would choose one over the other. So we'll spend most of our time now on ABC and page 133. There's a lot of definitions and terminology there. Make sure you've got a good handle on what these things are. So activity is something needed to get work done. Okay, so a task, something that has to be done for something to be manufactured and completed. So a production setup, if we're going to do a batch of goods and run it through our factory, we might do what they call a production setup and get our machinery ready, gather all the raw materials before we begin this production line. A resource, we all know what resources are, things that we're going to use to make a product. Consumed performing activities, so salaries and supplies would be some good examples of resources. A cost driver, now we've got a couple different sub-terminologies there with the cost driver. Cost drivers can be resource consumption cost drivers, or they can be activity consumption cost drivers. And we'll look at them on the next screen here. And those definitions are on 133 again. So a resource consumption cost driver is the amount of resources consumed by the activity. Okay, so the number of items in a purchase or the number of items in a sales order. An activity consumption cost driver is measures the amount of activity performed for an object, the number of batches used to manufacture a product. So how many batches are used to manufacture something. So we look at this in the terms of resources consumed or the number of activities performed is really the two ways to think about it. So cost assignment, that's really what this is all about, right? Both volume-based and ABC are all about cost assignment. How do we take this big pool of indirect costs that are not easily traceable to something and allocate them to our manufacturing process, to the products that we manufacture? How do we do that? So for the two-stage cost assignment approach that I talk about here is on page 134. Really is where they talk about it a little bit more in 135, and they give us some examples. The top of page 134, they show you the volume-based approach with the picture, Exhibit 5.1, and then on page 135 they show you Exhibit 5.2, which is the ABC two-stage method, and they begin to describe it towards the bottom of page 134, the two-stage cost assignment procedure. And so volume-based systems assign factory overhead to a single plant or departmental cost pool first. Okay, so we gave some examples of both in chapter 4 where we said, okay, we can just take all of our costs and accumulate them company-wide and then allocate them to products, or we can take our costs, accumulate them by department, and then do an allocation within each department of, based on direct labor, labor cost, machine hours, whatever made sense. So we could do it either way in the volume-based method. For ABC, we're still gathering this big pool of overhead, but now we're assigning factory overhead to activities or activity cost pools using resource consumption cost drivers, and then assigning these costs to cost objects using activity consumption cost drivers. So we're looking at cost drivers from a resource standpoint and then an activity standpoint from both points. Okay, so summary between the two. We know ABC defines cost pools as activities rather than production plant or department cost centers, so a different way to look at it. Cost drivers for ABC are based on an activity or activities performed for the cost object, and we'll go through what those examples are here real soon. Volume-based is basically going purely based on volume, the volume of labor, the volume of machine hours, bears little or no relationship to the consumption of resources by the cost objects. Okay, so it's a simplistic approach, which still works. It gives us an answer, but we're going to find out that ABC will give us probably a better answer. And so as we begin to think about implementation of a ABC system, we have to do what they call an activity analysis. And there's really three steps we're going to take a look at. And all three steps are on both pages 136 and 137. And you can see step one at the top, they talk about identify resource costs and activities. Step two, assign resource costs to activities. And then step three, assign activity cost to cost objects. And of course, within each step, there's some sub-steps and all those kinds of things too to be thinking about. So the activity analysis, a firm identifies the work it performs to carry out its operations. Okay, what are the things that we do to manufacture something? Okay, so we're gathering data from existing documents and records. So we just look through our documentation. What are the things that we do? We collect additional data using questionnaires, observation, or interviews, right? We want to talk to all the people who make stuff. What do you do to make stuff? We need to understand that. Sample questions include what work activities do you do? How much time do you spend? What resources are required to perform them? What value does the activity have for the product, service, customer, or organization? Okay, so those are all the things we need to be thinking about here is those activities. So obviously it makes complete sense to go and interview the people who are doing things and understand what they do and what value is achieved by doing their activity or their processes. And so once we kind of have some of those answers in front of us, we then classify those answers, which are all the different activities that our people are performing, and we classify them in a way in which the activities consume resources. Okay, so now we've got all these activities we're going to organize into these four categories, and the four categories are just right in the middle of page 136. Unit level is performed in each individual unit of product or service of the firm. Okay, so direct materials used to manufacture something. Batch level is performed for each batch or group of units or products or services. Okay, setting up all of our machinery to run a batch of production. Placing purchase orders to get a purchase of raw materials in the door. Product level supports the production of a specific product or service. Okay, so engineering changes to modify parts of a product. Facility level supports the entire operation. So think about facility level as what it takes to maintain a factory or a shop that we're manufacturing things in. Insurance, property tax, maybe some utilities, so, just general overhead things that are required no matter what. Okay, so some more examples of unit level then. And of course, they're giving us those again on about the middle of page 136. Some more examples of unit level include units of production related to depreciation, energy costs for machinery used for individual units of production. Batch level, some examples, machine setups, quality control, wages for workers that move product within the factory, energy costs for machinery that's used for multiple units of product at the same time. Product level examples, salaries for product line purchasing managers, quality control, product development, depreciation and maintenance. And finally some facility, depreciation of the factory, security, insurance, property tax, plant manager salary, costs that support the entire operation of the factory. So obviously you could imagine that developing an ABC system is quite extensive. It's not an easy thing to do, and from my experiences, typically if you're going to move from a volume-based to an ABC system, you hire some consultants to help you. It require better software systems, obviously, to track all these costs, and so it's something that's not easily done. It typically makes sense to grab some people to help you to do those kinds of things. So developing an ABC system, um, one thing to think about then is identify resource costs and activities, right? So we're going to do that activity analysis, identify the key activities done to manufacture our product, and then how do those activities consume resources, okay? Next, we'll assign resource costs to activities. So we're going to look at resource consumption cost drivers, okay? The cause and effect relationships that drive an activity and a cost, okay? What makes the cause and effect? So the direct number of labor hours, setups, moves, machine hours, number of employees, square footage, something that can be used to assign cost. Assign activities to cost objects is the next one, and those should just be bullet points. There's not necessarily 1, 2, or 3. For some reason, the symbols seem kind of silly, but those are just bullet points. Assign activities to cost objects. Use activity consumption cost drivers, purchase orders, receiving reports, parts stored, direct labor hours, manufacturing cycle time to assign activity costs. Okay, so using activity cost to assign to a cost object is what we're looking at there. Some benefits of an ABC system. They begin to list these on the bottom of page 137. Better profitability measures due to more accurate costing. That's a key one, right? If everybody else in my industry is using ABC and I'm not, they have a competitive advantage over me. Okay, that's one way to think about it, because they're going to be able to price their products to achieve maximum profitability. They're going to be able to make some decisions that will definitely benefit their company that I can't make. I just don't have the information to make those kinds of decisions. So better profitability measures, better decision making, what are value added versus non-value added activities. We want to minimize as many non-value added activities as we can. So that's a good thing that'll help us identify what we're doing. Is what we're doing makes sense? You know, we're going to talk about interviewing all of our employees and say, what do you do on a daily basis to manufacture a product? And we're going to probably figure out that some of the things they're doing are maybe redundant or really don't make sense, and we can eliminate those. Information for process improvement, right? We should be able to be better, more efficient at manufacturing whatever it is we make. Improve cost planning, get a better handle on our costs, be able to project costs a little bit better. That's an important thing. And helps identify and control the cost of unused capacity. So in other words, what's the cost of not using our full capacity? There's a cost to that, and how can we find out what that is, and then once we know, minimize that. So here's an example of volume-based versus ABC, and this is a great example, and you should definitely read through it. And it starts on page 138 and goes for a while. We're going to walk through it together here, but really about 138 to about 140, 138 to 141 is where this goes through, and definitely worth looking at. So it'll help you tremendously when you go to do your homework. So what we have here is we have Haymarket Biotech, and they produce and sell two different communication systems. They have the really fancy one called Anywhere, AW, and the more basic one called Secure Zone. Okay, so AW allows allows employees to communicate with each other no matter where they are in the world, whereas Secure Zone doesn't have the same length in terms of communications. You have to be like within 10 miles of each other to use SC, but you can be anywhere to use AW. So AW is a much more fancier product, has more bells and whistles, and so that's what this company makes. They're very good at what they do. They sell to governments, to corporations, because they're selling this secure way for people to communicate with each other. And so AW, just remember, that's the fancier product, more bells and whistles. SZ is the more basic model, does the job but with limited range. Okay, so production volume you can see for SZ much higher than AW. The selling price of AW though is double the price of SZ, which makes sense because it's much more fancier. You can see what the unit direct materials and labor are for both. AW uses a lot more materials and labor because it's fancier, takes more time and materials to make it. And then direct labor hours for both, you can see what those are, and you can see what the direct labor hours per unit are. 5 hours for AW, 3.75 for SC. And so they're going to do this using the traditional volume-based costing system, and which of course will assign overhead based on direct labor hours. And because they make a lot more SZ than they do of AW, a lot more cost will be allocated to SZ because that's just where the production volume is at. So they budgeted for 100,000 direct labor hours for the year. Their overhead budget was $2 million, and so it gives you a pretty easy way to figure out the rate, right? We estimate total overhead, and we divide that by the estimated number of direct labor hours, and we get $20 per hour. So therefore, factory overhead assigned to AW is 500,000, and you can see 25,000 direct labor hours times 20, and then and $100, 500,000 direct labor, or 500,000, which is 500,000 divided by 5,000 units to get to $100 per unit. So the firm used 25,000 direct labor hours and manufactured 5,000 units of AW. Factory overhead assigned to SZ is $1,005,000, 75 times 20 in total, and $75 per unit. The firm used 75,000 direct labor hours to manufacture 20,000 units of SC. Okay, and so that information that they put in the paragraph is just listed more in a table on page 139. It's probably easier to follow in a table in the book than it was in that paragraph. But you can see the very top chart or table on page 139 shows you the volume, how much was produced of each, the selling price, the unit direct materials and labor, the direct labor hours, and then the direct labor hours per unit. And then beneath that is the results of the volume costing, where they come up with the overhead rate of 20. Then they show us how much they allocated to AW, which was $100 per unit, and how much they allocated to SZ, which was $75 per unit. And then here is what they call the profitability analysis, and at the very bottom of page 139 is the volume-based profitability analysis. The selling price of each, the direct materials for each, 280, and overhead, 175, to get down to cost per unit for both, which is $100 profit margin for AW and a $45 profit margin for SC. Okay, so that's the volume-based approach. So it looks like AW is much more profitable. And in the setup to the question, they kind of told us that with HBT, the company manufacturing these products, looking at this information, they're in a growing industry, that they expect this industry to grow, I think it's like 8 to 10% per year. And they say that AW's demand has not been very strong, only 3 to 5% per year. So while the industry has been growing, the demand for their fancier model has not been growing at the same rate. And they're looking at this information and going, well, that's our most profitable model. That's the one that we should be selling. And so they're looking at this information going, let's increase our advertising and try to really promote the AW product, because in our view it's more profitable. So that's what they're looking at right now before they think about going to ABC. So now we're going to take the same information and everything else, but now apply it to ABC. And so I mentioned before that we have a $2 million pool of overhead or indirect cost. And you can see with this screen that we've broken down those costs into 4 different activities. And so as they begin to think about an ABC system, and they do their interviews and questionnaires, and they're looking at what is it that our people are doing, and we came up with 4 main activities. Engineering, the budgeted cost of $125, and then the activity consumption cost drive will be engineering hours. I'm sure we've got a fleet of engineers who are continuously working on our product, and so we can easily measure their hours. Then we do setups. We have a setup cost of $300,000, and the driver is how many setups will we do. Next is machine hours, 1,000,005 for machine hours, and the driver is the number of machine hours used. And then the packing. Once the product's manufactured, of course, we need to package it and the whole works. And you can see $75,000 for that, and that's driven by the number of packing orders. So total $2 million worth of cost organized by those 4 activities that you see there. Okay, so volume-based versus ABC, HBT has gathered the following operating data pertaining to each of its products. Okay, so looking at engineering hours for each product, the number of setups for each product, the machine hours for each product, and the number of packing orders for each product. So remember that AW is the fancier model that requires more parts, more engineering hours per unit, and then but it's not sold at the same volume as SZ is. Okay, so that's kind of your key differences between the two. So don't forget about those. Okay. This screen, and I should be telling you that a lot of this data is on page 140 and a little bit more in 141. So 140 and 141 is where you'll want to look. And you can see here that volume-based versus ABC again. And now we're looking at the consumption cost drivers, the engineering hours, the setups, the machine hours, and the packing orders. We're looking at the budgeted cost for each of the activities. And then we're looking at the budgeted activity consumption of each to get an activity consumption rate. Okay, so the previous screen, this data here, right, we had cost, the first 2 columns, or we've got, I'm sorry, not cost, but we've got the activities here. Okay, so we've got hours, setups, hours again, and then packing orders organized by the 2 products, and then in total. The previous screen before that had the budgeted cost. Okay, so this screen is taking all that data and saying here is the rate per consumption activity. Okay, so for every engineering hour it's $10 per hour. For every setup it's $1,000. For every machine hour it's $10. For every packing order it's $5 per order. Okay. Once we have that, it says factory overhead costs for AW at 5,000 units of production. So imagine that we've got all of our ABC data. We've got our 4 activities. We've got a rate per activity. We're measuring how much consumption of the activity happened to make 5,000 units. And then we multiply that. You can see we got columns 1, 2, 3. And then column 4 is the multiplication of 2 and 3. And then column 5 is the result of that, is the overhead per unit of making 5,000 units. Okay, so we've got $10 per engineering hour times 5,000 hours to get 50,000. 1,000 setups, we had 200 setups, $200,000. Machine hours, $10 per hour. We had 50,000 hours, 500,000. We had $5 per packing order, 5,000. Activities, 5,000 packing orders happened, $25,000. So we come up with overhead of $775, and then we get an overhead per unit making 5,000 units. So all of the, for column 5, everything's divided by 5,000 units of AW. Remember that AW is the fancier model. We'll do the same thing for SZ. We're making 20,000 units. We make many more SZ models than AW, 20,000 versus 5,000. And you can again see our activity consumption rates here, our activity consumption, total overhead, and overhead per unit. So $10, or engineering hours is $10 per hour. The setups are 1,000, machine hours are 10, packing orders are 5. A lot more activities though for SZ. And we get to 1,225,000, and we get overhead per unit of 61.25. So I want you to keep in mind that we had 775 of overhead allocated here, and we had 1,225,000 here. It still adds up to be $2 million. We're taking the same pool of cost, $2 million, and just slicing and dicing it a little bit differently with ABC versus traditional. So that's the key difference between them. And then this will give me my profitability for AW versus SC. My selling price, my direct materials and labor, which didn't change between the two obviously, but here's where it's different is now we're going to look at overhead assigned by the different activities: engineering, setups, machine running hours, packing, and then get total factory overhead, get a cost per unit, and get a profit margin. Very different numbers between volume-based and ABC. Very, very different. If you remembered, AW was $100 profit margin under traditional volume-based, and it's only 45 under ABC. Okay, which one do you think is right? Hopefully you're thinking ABC is right, and the answer would be yes, that is more right. When it comes to allocations, I shouldn't really say right. I should just say more accurate. Um, because you can do allocations so many different ways, there really isn't necessarily a complete right answer, but we're saying the ABC answer is more accurate than traditional based because we took it deeper. We did a deeper level of allocation by looking at our overhead, what drives it, what are the activities, how many of these activities are happening, and we got into a much deeper analysis between traditional versus ABC when it came to our two big products, AW versus SZ. And so you can see here what our differences are. Our unit overhead cost, volume based, AW got 100, SZ got 75. Under activity based, look at how much more overhead AW gets, $55 more, whereas SZ gets less, $13.75 less. This should have brackets around it because they get less. Okay, so the profit margins then are very different. 55 versus 13.75 different in the profit margin. So extremely significant. Okay, so under the traditional volume-based, SZ was allocated too much overhead because so much more of it was made. That was by far the highest volume product that we were making. Therefore, based on volume, it was getting more overhead. It was getting too much, what they call cross subsidization. Okay, so volume-based costing tends to undercost low volume products, which is AW, it was undercosted, and it tends to overcost high volume products, which was SC. A situation often referred to as cost cross subsidization. That's what happened, and that's what the issue was for HBT. So HBT now would need to reconsider or think twice about their advertising campaign to sell more AW, right? Because now they have to be thinking, maybe I need to raise the price of AW. I'm not even charging enough for it to be as profitable as I thought it was. So maybe what they could do is actually raise the price on AW and maybe even decrease the cost of SZ a little bit. And maybe that's one of the answers that they'll get by doing this. So 5 steps in strategic decision making, and I'm an HBT example. That's on the bottom of page 141. So now that we've done this, we've compared the two methods. What are some things we can think about to make decisions? So it says here, determine the strategic issues surrounding the problem. HBT competes on differentiation, right? They're basically saying it in the setup to the question or the problem is that they're really relying on high quality, that they've got really good engineering, that they're really good on maintaining the security of their product. They're really good at staying ahead of the curve of maintaining the secureness of this communications device that they have. And so they've got this kind of an advantage. And so they're basically saying that we're different from other companies who make the same thing because we're ahead of the curve, we're the most secure, and therefore that's why you should buy our product. Okay. So question number 2 then, identify alternative actions, focus on AW or SC. HBT was considering an advertising campaign, and reallocating manufacturing facilities to favor the AW product line. They may think twice about that now. Question 3, obtain information and conduct analysis of the alternatives. Okay, so what are some of the um, what are some of the alternatives? The cost analysis based on ABC costing, of course, gave us a little bit better information. Okay, and so obviously the ABC numbers should be more relied on to make decisions. And so they need to then, they know that SZ is more profitable based on the current pricing, and so lots of decisions could be made based on that. Okay, so question 4 then, based on the strategy and analysis, choose and implement the desired alternative. Okay, so um, basically we know that we're competing on differentiation. Step 1. Step 2 is what should we focus on? And the answer so far would say we should focus on SZ because it's more profitable. Question 3 is we can definitely believe the ABC numbers are more accurate than the volume based. Step 4 then is what should we do with all this? What can be done based on knowing this information? And so obviously not promoting AW over SZ would be one, and instead focus on SZ to improve overall profitability. Okay, obviously that's the profitable product, all things remaining equal. They could look at the market and figure out, could we change our pricing? Could we drop SZ's price a little bit and sell more? Could we raise the price of AW and still be competitive based on realizing that our costing wasn't very good and so on? So question 5 is kind of just ongoing. We always evaluate the effectiveness of the implementation of step 4. So if we're going to make the decision just to say, keep it simple and say, oh wait, let's change our advertising to focus on SZ instead of AW, yes, we can do that, and that could be one of our choices, or we could implement a couple different things at the same time. But question 5 is just reevaluating, making sure that whatever decision we made is working, and if it isn't working, what can we do differently? Next then is the concept of ABM, activity-based management. And they begin to talk on that on the bottom of page 142 for just a little bit, but mostly on 143 and 144. Activity-based management is really just managing the activities to improve the value of products or services to customers, increase profitability. So we're looking at all those activities that we discovered that we do, and we're trying to make sure that we're always effective and efficient in how we do them. So whatever it is that we do, whatever the processes and activities that we do, are we continuously getting better at them, more efficient and more effective? Improve management's focus on the firm's critical success factors, enhance firm's competitive advantage. ABC is a major source of information. So it's basically gathering information, continuously looking at new information as it comes in, and figuring out what can we do better and how can we be more effective. ABM can be classified into 2 categories, operational and strategic. Operational enhances operational efficiency and asset utilization at the lowest cost. Focuses on doing things right and performing activities more efficiently. Okay, so again, as we are doing our operations, manufacturing our product, doing whatever it is that we do, are we good at being efficient? Are we using our assets the right way? Are we continuously looking at ways to lower cost when it comes to manufacturing our product? Strategic ABM is altering the demand for activities, increase profitability through activity efficiency. So we're looking at it more in overall, as an overall strategy, and then more operational, more down in the details. Some key things to have when it comes to ABC, ABM, the tools that they say, is we want to look at activity analysis, and that's on the bottom of page 143, also a little bit on page 144. in an organization assesses each of its activities based on its need by the product or customer, its efficiency, and its value content. So in other words, does the activity, is it needed? How efficient are we at doing it? What kind of value is it adding? A value added analysis is performed in an effort to eliminate activities that add little or no value to a customer. Resource consumption here can be reduced, and the firm can focus on activities that increase customer satisfaction. Okay, so if some activities really don't add value, is there a way to reduce that and to eliminate that potentially? Because whatever that thing is, it's not really adding value, it's not really increasing customer satisfaction, so can it be reduced or eliminated? And so under ABC ABM, we've got high value and low value activities. Page 144 starts to look at these. Bottom page 144. High value activities, they increase significantly the value of the product or service, so it's absolutely needed. It's needed to meet customer requirements, enhances the purchase, enhance purchase materials or components, contributes to customer satisfaction is a critical step. Okay, so if you remove one of these, you are then completely affecting the value of the product or the service that's being provided. In other words, the customer may not want it anymore. Okay, if you affect one of these. Low value consumes time, resource, or space, but adds little or nothing to satisfy customer needs. So these are the things we want to identify: high value versus low value. Low value can be eliminated without affecting the form, fit, and function of the product or service. Okay. ABC can also be used for a customer profitability analysis, page 149. And I thought that they gave a pretty good example in the book too. On page 149, they gave the example of Best Buy, and that Best Buy classifies its customers as angels or devils. I did not know that. And so Best Buy really focuses its advertising on customers that they say are their angels, and they don't want to they don't want to bring the devils into their store. They'd rather not have them in there. They want to focus on the angels instead. And so ABC is a way to identify our customers and to figure out which customers are more profitable than others. And so once we know that, then we can figure out how do we get our profitable customers in the store or willing to buy from us, and how do we detract the unprofitable customers from wanting to come to our store and buy from us. And so we're really identifying customers, customer service activities and cost drivers, determining profitability for each customer or group of customers, and that's really what Best Buy is doing, is kind of aggregating customers by behavior or demographics to say these are our angels, and then likewise choosing a customer mix, and then of course by choosing a customer mix we're going to focus our advertising that would help us attract those customers that we want. Okay. Customer cost analysis is the first step in a customer profitability analysis. Identifies activities, cost drivers to service customers before and after sales. Okay, so what does it cost to deliver our goods or service to a customer? Customer-related costs, just like activities, we can organize them the same way. Unit level, okay, resources consumed for each unit sold to a customer. Commission, shipping cost, batch level, resources consumed for each sales transaction, order processing cost or invoicing cost, then a customer sustaining cost, resources consumed to service a customer regardless of the number of units or batches sold, monthly statement processing, collection costs for late payments, some things like that. Customer costs can be classified into the following categories: distribution or sales. Okay, distribution is channel costs or resources consumed in each distribution channel the firm uses to service customers. Okay, so cost of operating a regionalized warehouse or a centralized distribution center. For sales, sustaining costs or are resources consumed to sustain sales and service activities that cannot be traced to an individual unit, batch, customer. Uh, so basically your marketing expenses would be a sales. So distribution, what does it cost to deliver our product to our customer? Sales, what does it take to market or sell to our customer? So pretty big categories there. And so what businesses do or what firms do then is try to figure out who our most profitable customers are and how do we market to those people. And then something else, a terminology that they use is customer lifetime value. In other words, trying to figure out who our most profitable customers are and what we expect the total value of that customer to be. So the net present value of all future profits derived from a customer would be a customer's lifetime value. I thought that was kind of interesting. So finally then, when it comes to customer profitability and doing some analysis, and they show us a lot of really good information also on page 151. They have an exhibit where they're kind of breaking down some of these different customers of a company, and they're breaking down the cost drivers and rates by the different cost categories of batch level, unit level, sustaining, and so on, and using that to figure out who our most profitable customers will be. And they've got 3 different customers, and they do this analysis and figure out who the most profitable customer will be. And once we know that, obviously we can choose to alter our marketing and advertising and obviously focus our time and resources on that profitable company, and the one that's not very profitable, maybe if we lose them it wouldn't really hurt our feelings, that kind of a thing. So the growth potential of a customer's industry, cross-selling potential, what are possible reactions to customer changes in sales terms or services, how important is the customer as a future sales reference. So once we know who our most profitable customers are, think of all the possibilities, and that's what this screen is telling us. Okay, can this customer even grow bigger? If we focus our time and resources on this customer, cross-selling potential. Can we sell them additional things if we were maybe to branch out into different categories? If we change something in terms of sales or service, how would this particular customer be affected? Would it be negatively impacted or not? Could this customer be a good reference for us? Okay, so think about things like that. I remember an article, this has been a few years ago, Sprint actually fired some of its customers. They identified that a small number, is like maybe 5% of their customers, were using a really high proportion of all their customer service time. So basically 5% of their customers were using up more than half of all customer service time, basically call-ins for help and things like that. And they did an analysis, realized they're losing money on these people, and so we're just going to fire them. We're not going to renew their contracts. When they try to renew their contracts, we're going to say, no, I'm not going to let you do it. Which I thought was kind of interesting. But just think about examples in your life of how things have changed, us as consumers. Think about how Amazon has changed. I'm not sure, I've bought a lot from Best Buy, and Best Buy has a rewards program. And but I'm also a big Amazon guy, and I have been one of those people who walked into Amazon, and I've got an app on my smartphone, and I've scanned something at Best Buy and go, hey, this is cheaper on Amazon. I'm not going to buy it here. I'm just going to order it. I can wait a few days and get it. It doesn't matter to me. And it's interesting to me how things like that work. But it's interesting. I'm not much of a marketing person, but I'm more on the cost and accounting side, obviously. But it's interesting to me what companies can do with information and decide how they want to promote or advertise their products or services. Okay, very good. Thank you very much.